Hey Science and Cooking, it's Greg, and I just wanted to talk for a second about temperature and the different scales we use to measure it. So this is Kelvin, Celsius or centigrade, and Fahrenheit. And so what I'm going to do is I'm going to go backwards in time. So we're going to start with the newest scale, and then we'll go backwards to the earlier scales, which we still use, unfortunately. But the newest one was created by this guy here, and his name is Lord Kelvin. He was a lord. And he had this idea of something called infinite cold, or absolute zero, which means there's a temperature that you can't go lower than. So that means that if you could create a really good thermometer, then you'd have something called, you'd have the absolute zero here, so this is 0 Kelvin at the bottom, and then it just goes up from there, and you can have, it can just keep going to 100 Kelvin and 200 Kelvin and all the way up as high as you want, 2,000,000 Kelvin. But it goes down to zero. It doesn't have any negative. There's no negative Kelvin. That doesn't exist because there's an absolute zero, and he defined that absolute zero as 0 Kelvin. But before that, there was a little bit sillier of a guy, and this silly guy is Anders Celsius. And Anders Celsius didn't know about absolute zero, but what he did know about was water. So he said, let's have zero be the freezing point of H2O, of water. And so he built his scale around that, and he said, oh, and then we'll just have some negative numbers too. Whatever. And so he had his zero somewhere up here. So this is 0 degrees Celsius or centigrade. And then, there's some negative numbers, and then he didn't know, but down here there was a real zero, and that was 0 Kelvin. And it turns out that the 0 Celsius is actually equal to 273 Kelvin. And then, this goes up further, and since he liked water a lot, he said that 100 degrees Celsius, we'll define that as the boiling of water. And that's why it's called centigrade, because the temperature of boiling minus temperature of freezing is equal to 100. So there's 100 grades here, or sorry, 100 grades between 100 and 0, between boiling point and freezing point of water. So centi means 100, and grade means grade. So that's why it's called centigrade. And also from this information here, we know that if we have x degrees Celsius, that's equal to x plus 273 Kelvin. So that's how you convert between those two, and why it's that conversion. And then, even before Celsius, there was a guy whose name was Fahrenheit, and he looks sillier, and you can tell because he's kind of got a mullet there. And he did his definition of zero and things like that with experiments of brine and not water, and so his scale was a little bit funkier, and so we have 0 Kelvin down here, and then you go up, and then you have we have 0 Celsius, and this was for freezing of water, right? Freeze H2O, and then the 0 for this scale, 0 degrees Fahrenheit, was somewhat lower than that, and then also this 0 degrees Celsius is equal on his scale to 32 degrees Fahrenheit. That's the freezing of water, and then eventually we get up to, as we were saying before, the boiling point of water, which is 100 degrees Celsius, and this is equal to 212 degrees Fahrenheit. Strange way of defining things, but knowing the freezing point and the boiling point in both these two scales, you can actually figure out what the conversion is between the two. So if you just assume that you have the conversion that looks something like, let's say you have x degrees Fahrenheit is equal to so there's some factor we don't know that we're going to have to figure out in converting. Let's say a y degrees centigrade plus some other number b. So there's some scaling factor a and then some number that we have to add in b to make the conversion between the two. And so you want to know what is a and b. So we're just assuming this form, and then from these two points, the freezing point and the boiling point, we can figure out what a and b are. This is just in case you forget how to convert. So if you know the numbers how to convert and aren't worried about remembering it or figuring out a way to remember it, you can skip this. But I'm just going to explain how to figure out what a and b are from knowing these two facts. So for using the freezing point in this equation, what you can do is you can say, okay, well, at the freezing point, we know that x in Fahrenheit is 32, and we know that y degrees centigrade is 0. So this is equal to 0 degrees centigrade plus b. So that means that this is gone, and we know that b is equal to 32. Okay, so now all we need to figure out is what a is. And so the way that we can do this is we can write an equation where we cancel out we cancel out b and we only worry about a. And the way that we can do that is if we look at a difference in temperature. So we look at the difference in temperature in Fahrenheit and a difference in temperature in centigrade. So that is, let's say we have x1 and x2 in Fahrenheit. So we have some x1 that we know in Fahrenheit minus some x2 in Fahrenheit, and then we do the same. So we subtracted the left side here from itself, and then we also have a y1 and a y2 on the right hand side. So we have something like a y1 degrees Celsius plus b, and then minus a y2 degrees Celsius, so minus b. And so the plus b and minus b's cancel here, and so then we have an equation now that relates a difference in temperatures in Fahrenheit to a difference in temperatures in centigrade. And so if we rearrange this a little bit, what we can actually do is we can see that a is actually equal to x1 minus x2 over y1 minus y2. And so if you know two temperatures that are equivalent, so an x1 that corresponds to a y1, that is a temperature in Fahrenheit that corresponds to a temperature in Celsius, and then another one just like that where you know the temperature in Fahrenheit and the temperature in Celsius, then what you can do is you can figure out what a is. And we know just that from the boiling point and freezing point. And so we can just plug in our x1 and y1 to be the boiling point. So that's 212 minus, well, let's do the ones first. And then we have, this is the same thing, the boiling point in centigrade is 100, and then let's do the freezing points, which are 32 and 0. And so then this is 180 over 100, and this is equal to 9/5. So we know that a equals 9/5. And so now we know how to convert between the two because we know a and b. And so that means x degrees Fahrenheit is equal to 9/5 y